Welcome, listeners, to Snippit Sports Science Podcast, sponsored by EliteForm.com. I'm Jared Coleman-Stark, and I'm very sorry to have not been here recently. Also feeling very grateful towards Chris Gaviglio for carrying the team while I've been away. There's a lot happening in the world, isn't there? But just getting into the article. The article we have today is Neuromuscular Electrical Stimulation as a Potential Countermeasure for Skeletal Muscle Atrophy and Weakness during human spaceflight. This was written by Nicola, Maffiuletti, and colleagues. It's a mini review that was published in August 2019 in Frontiers of Physiology, great journal. As I think most of us know, human spaceflight is associated with a substantial loss of skeletal muscle mass and muscle strength. If you got no gravity, you're going to lose your muscle mass and your muscle strength, obviously. Something that's interesting, though, is that there is considerable subject variability in the extent of that muscle atrophy and functional loss. One of the most affected muscles seems to be the triceps surae, for which muscle fiber atrophy of 20% has been observed after 6 months of spaceflight. Makes sense. Being your major weight-bearing muscle group, it's going to be losing the most mass and function when you're not bearing weight, such as in spaceflight. So for anyone who's confused right at this moment, I don't mean triceps brachii. Some of you might have been thinking of the triceps brachii. We're talking about the triceps surae, which is the group of 3 muscle bodies in the calf. So that's your gastrocnemius, which has the 2 heads, and the soleus muscle. So obviously, those 3 muscle bodies are carrying the majority of your weight pretty much all the time. And so when you're in spaceflight, those are going to become unloaded and thus lose muscle mass and function. Long-term spaceflight is also known to impair functionality, neuromuscular control, and skeletal muscle strength, with strength decline primarily reflecting the loss of muscle mass. The spaceflight-related muscle weakness appears to reflect a number of neuromuscular alterations, including a selective transformation of slow muscle fibers, type 1, to faster phenotype, type 2. In fact, there's evidence that slow muscle fibers are predominantly affected by spaceflight. Recent pilot data from the Sarcolab study also suggests that reduced plantar flexor muscle volume may be associated with altered muscle architecture, contractile protein composition, and impaired muscle fiber contractility. That fits in well with the triceps surae being the most atrophied and having the most loss of function of any of the muscle groups, because not only is it your primary standing weight-bearing muscle, it's also very, very slow twitch because it's working pretty much all the time, bearing your weight when you're standing or walking. And so obviously as they're saying here that the slow muscle fibers are being transformed to faster phenotypes, the type 2s, it's consistent with that. And this also looks consistent with people who are just simply sedentary. When people are sedentary, there's also a selective transformation of the slow muscle fibers to the faster phenotypes, the type 2s. So it's consistent there, and we might see a little bit of overlap for the effects that neuromuscular electrical stimulation could have for spaceflight versus someone who is just sedentary, whether that's forced or voluntary. Considering the rationale for neuromuscular electrical stimulation, this intervention involves delivering pre-programmed trains of stimuli to superficial muscles via self-adhesive skin electrodes. These are connected to small portable current generators. Such electrical stimuli can be used to evoke relatively strong, albeit submaximal, muscle contractions, whose activation pattern is substantially different from that of voluntary contractions. Neuromuscular electrical stimulation recruits motor units in a non-selective, spatially fixed, and temporally synchronous pattern, with the advantage of activating fast muscle fibers at relatively low force levels, but produce greater muscle fatigue when compared with voluntary actions. If provided repeatedly, neuromuscular electrical stimulation improves muscle strength, power, and endurance in healthy individuals, even though these effects are not superior to those induced by voluntary training. More importantly, neuromuscular electrical stimulation has been shown to preserve or restore muscle mass and aspects of neuromuscular function during or following a period of reduced activity due to illness, injury, or surgery, with greater effectiveness compared to other rehabilitation modalities. This mini-review by Nicola, Maffiuletti, and colleagues is focused on the use of neuromuscular electrical stimulation as a potentially complementary countermeasure against skeletal muscle atrophy and weakness induced by human spaceflight. Now, they do actually already have a neuromuscular electrical stimulation device in orbit today. It's called the Tonus 3 unit. And this unit that's currently in use possesses 4 different programs that are designed to stimulate the muscles. They have a calf and quadriceps program, a calf and hamstring program, a calf, abdominal, and back muscles program, and a shoulder muscle program. But we are going to be focusing on neuromuscular electrical stimulation in ground-based analogs as well, because, it's all well, good, and fun to look at interventions for spaceflight, but at the end of the day, most of us it's probably more common to want interventions that are applicable in ground-based analogs rather than in actual orbit. But what we find is that the major underlying cause of muscle atrophy in microgravity is a net negative muscle protein balance. Of course, that's you can imagine that's certainly the circumstance in most muscle atrophy. You pretty much need a net negative muscle protein balance to be losing protein from the muscle. And given the challenge of experimentation and countermeasures of testing in space, ground-based models in microgravity, such as tilted head-down bed rest, lower limb immobilization, or axial unloading, are generally used. So we can relate to these a little bit more, right? Lower limb immobilization, that could be like if one of your athletes is wearing a cast. Axial unloading, I'm no expert on it, but I believe it's when there's a spinal injury, and it's sort of a spinal sort of cast that allows some unloading from the spine, typically for like cervical spinal injuries is my best understanding. I could be completely wrong there. But these models have demonstrated a substantial decrease in post-absorptive and postprandial muscle protein synthesis, which is suggested to be accompanied by an increase in muscle protein breakdown in the early phase of disuse. Various neuromuscular electrical stimulation protocols have been employed in a range of ground-based analog studies in an attempt to attenuate muscle atrophy and weakness in healthy subjects. There's a great diversity in the neuromuscular electrical stimulation parameters and protocols between different studies. So the duration of the electrical stimulation can range from 40 minutes to 16 hours per day. The frequency can range from 30 to 100 hertz, and the intensity can range from visible contraction of the muscle to the maximum toll-rated current. So despite the diversity in these parameters and protocols, a common finding is that daily neuromuscular electrical stimulation is an effective countermeasure to prevent the loss of lower limb muscle mass associated with short-term disuse from 5 to 60 days as a result of casting, bed rest, and axial unloading. And while neuromuscular electrical stimulation has preserved muscle strength in some studies, the effects have been inconsistent. As such, despite the clear potential of neuromuscular electrical stimulation to maintain muscle mass during unloading, particularly when complemented with protein supplementation, careful definition of the neuromuscular electrical stimulation implementation is vital to ensure optimal muscle functional outcomes. Methodologically, at least 4 simple strategies are able to amplify the muscle response to neuromuscular electrical stimulation while minimizing the current-induced discomfort, which is the main limitation of electrical stimulation. The first strategy is to localize the muscle motor point, the skin area above the stimulated muscle, where the motor threshold is the lowest for a given electrical pulse. The second strategy is to implement a familiarization period of a few days. The third strategy is to provide control of the stimulation unit directly to the participants. And the fourth and final strategy here is to allow the participant to contract the stimulated muscle voluntarily in order to divert attention away from the pain or discomfort induced by the electrical stimulation. Now, I've always thought maybe not always, but for a while I've thought that another great strategy for this, so I guess a fifth hypothetical strategy from me, would be that you can probably do neuromuscular electrical stimulation with blood flow restriction. Because we found that with blood flow restriction training, you can exercise at a fairly low intensity in order to get adaptations. And it seems to me I've had some significant neuromuscular electrical stimulation in the past, and to me it seems like a relatively low intensity stimulus. Even if you crank it up to just about your threshold that you can actually handle, it's never going to be the same as sprinting or lifting heavy. It's just not possible. So it would be sort of a low intensity exercise. And if you combine that low intensity exercise of electrical stimulation with the blood flow restriction training, I think people could actually get some significant adaptation from that. I don't know, it's just hypothetical. I haven't seen a study on it. I hope to see a study one day, but I digress. So the researchers then have some future recommendations for spaceflight, and they write that based on the terrestrial best practice they recommend the following approach for possible neuromuscular electrical stimulation utilization in future space missions, including long-term exploration. Neuromuscular electrical stimulation should be seen as a complement to, rather than a substitute for, pre-existing exercise countermeasures. This implies careful planning of daily exercise training by considering that neuromuscular electrical stimulation is performed in static conditions, so that other non-physical tasks can be executed concomitantly and separately from the other exercise modalities. That is to say, neuromuscular electrical stimulation is not superimposed to running, cycling, or rowing. It would be quite difficult to implement it in a cyclic exercise like that because it can disrupt the continuous cycling of the limbs. They recommend simultaneous bilateral stimulation of the quadriceps femoris and the triceps surae muscles to be performed using 2 large rectangular or elliptical electrodes per muscle, one distal and one proximal, using a space-compatible portable 4-channel stimulator. I don't know anything about that space-compatible portable 4-channel stimulator, but I assume for space it's important. And they do have some remaining space challenges. So whilst the neuromuscular electrical stimulation-based resistance training has potential as an in-flight countermeasure, it has some limitations such as the inability to activate the entire muscle, issues with dose intolerance, the discomfort, but no long-term safety concerns, and unclear effects upon other physiological systems known to decondition in space, such as the skeletal or cardiovascular systems. Whilst neuromuscular electrical stimulation has recently been used upon other muscle groups and multiple body segments simultaneously, as well as with both agonist co-contraction, these modalities appear unsuitable at this stage because of practical considerations and lack of convincing evidence. So I hope you've enjoyed today's snippet, sponsored by EliteForm.com. If you guys see any, I'd really like to see some more research on neuromuscular electrical stimulation plus blood flow restriction training. I'd be really curious about that. So if any of you guys know about any studies looking at that, feel free to send them our ways. I'd be really interested to see those. And I should be back pretty regularly, and we're gonna try and queue up some more Jared and Chris proper sessions. So we'll be able to coordinate those soon. We got some good ideas for a series so far, so we might be doing a few different interesting series. We're thinking of using a bit more of like a seasonal structure where we have a topic per season and we follow along on that topic. A couple of episodes coming up. Hopefully we want to do one on ankle sprains. That would be really good. And look forward to talking to a microphone again soon. All right, ciao.